Broadcasting from the stages of London, this is Musical Talk, the UK's first independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. Before we get the show on the road, I want to tell you, our website, the site formerly known as http://hudson.net, forget that. It's now just www.musicaltalk.co.uk, so head on over there. That's an easier site address for you to remember to check out our forums, and you can email us from there. For example, I'm now Nick at musicaltalk.co.uk, Tim is Tim at musicaltalk.co.uk, Dom is Dom. You get the idea. What's going to happen today is we are going to feature an interview with the wonderful and talented Miss Emma Williams, and we're also going to have a review of Equus done by Tim, who was lucky enough to go and see that play very recently. But first I want to draw your attention to a voicemail we've recently had from Paul.
Paul Warshauer from the great city of Chicago. I love the show. Now, wondering when you are going to put the show on about the great musicals of Rodgers and Hammerstein. Continued success, and I think your show is spectacular, even if it is produced by a bunch of London people talking about our American theatre. Take care.
Ooh,
bye-bye.
Controversial.
So,
Rodgers and Hammerstein aren't that bad.
thank you, Paul, for your voicemail line. Not when we said from Paul, we didn't mean where Andy is from, Paul in Dorset. We actually meant from a guy called...
A listener called Paul.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, without British accents, that may be easily confused.
2 points there.
I was very pleased to hear that he's in the cast of Chicago, though.
Yes.
A real American.
The Windy City.
2 points there. That Paul brings up very, very strong points, very important points. And the first, I think we will have to do, we will do a show on Rodgers and Hammerstein and the sort of classic era of musicals.
Absolutely. I mean, unignorable.
Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart, Learn and Low.
Some might argue they were two different eras, actually, Rodgers and Hart and Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Okay, well.
And indeed, there's an ongoing debate over which, for better or for worse, which was better. And I'm quite happy to weigh in on that one.
Good. Look forward to
What's
that.
your view?
Well, I can...
As a sneak preview.
Well, I'm sorry, Paul. I prefer Rodgers and Hart. I'm so sorry, and I'll be explaining why later. I'm sure in another show. But
okay.
yes, it's a seam worth mining.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll come back to that.
But the other point which caught our ears in that voicemail was the fact,
and I think it was offered in a
loving way,
joking spirit,
yes.
or in a nudging spirit. But
yes.
Yes.
This point, of course, we had the famous PBS documentary, lovingly titled "Broadway: The American Musical."
Specifically, the American musical, allegedly.
Yes.
So it is alleged. Well, look, I mean, my view on this is that yes, certainly
we are a British podcast.
Well, we are a British podcast. A lot of what we're going to call musical theatre has its origins in, well, obviously, if you care to go right back, then we're talking about Europe again. But in terms of like what is recognised as the as Broadway musical,
the modern form,
it's a kind of an American art form.
Yeah.
I don't know that necessarily rules us out from having views on the matter, but
any established art form does become a world art form if it is worth its own weight.
And because they are world class, that in effect is what happens. So yes, certainly, I think we're willing to concede the point.
But is it as popular around the world as it is in America?
Not everywhere. It's fair to say as well, although it is as popular in, for example, Singapore, for example, in Korea, for example,
Germany.
in Japan, Germany, London, obviously.
I think it's fair to point out, actually, if you read almost any biography of a major composer of the musical, the back pages will be an appendix, which will nearly always list the productions in America and the London transfer.
Yes.
So in many ways, one might argue that the West End runs in tandem with Broadway.
I
don't think it initiates nearly so much. No. Although some things do, of course, open in the West End and clearly fall into the category of modern musicals.
Exactly. I mean,
now
British Invasion,
Cats, Les Miserables, and Phantom of the Opera opened on London, but people, Americans, will still call them Broadway musicals.
Well, they are Broadway musicals because they were successes on Broadway as well as in the West End.
But they are London musicals.
Yes, that's the originating. Well, I mean, obviously Lloyd Webber is English, Bublin and Schoenberg are French.
Cameron Mackintosh is English.
Exactly. But also, you have to kind of say about the settings of the things as well, because I mean, those are musicals which are set in France. Well, Phantom and Les Mis both set in France. You've got a number of Cats set in some. Who knows
garbage
where,
can
kind of more England than anywhere else, I suppose, because I mean they make their home in Victoria Grove, Mungo, Jerry and Rumpelteazer. Also, we've got shows which are American, which are set in England, like My Fair Lady, for example, as well, which come from absolutely the Broadway tradition.
The King and I. Well, I mean, yeah.
The King and I, exactly.
A lot of Rodgers. I mean, sort of touching lightly on the Rodgers and Hammerstein topic. A lot of their musicals were set in places unfamiliar to New York audiences.
Yes.
Like Siam.
Yes.
Oklahoma.
Yes, possibly not so familiar to New York.
Yeah, but I mean, most musicals would be set in New York.
Yes,
if you think about it before that and after that.
Well, of course, Oklahoma is in history as well. I mean, it goes back a long way.
But it's just a grey area anyway. If you're talking about the core stories, I mean, Hello Dolly. I don't know if you know this. Is based on a book written in 1835 called. No, it's before the Matchmaker is how it ultimately metamorphosed, but it originally can be traced back to a German book and then back to an English book, as it happens, from 1835 called A Day Well Spent. Yeah. So, where's the provenance in that? I think it all goes back to the fact that it's a world of culture out there, and anyone can talk about it.
What about the fact that also the Spring Awakening is a Vatican play? I mean, there's plenty of Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht.
I was going to say Weill and Brecht.
Those great Broadway writers, both of them not American at all.
And fairness, it has to be said, Irving Berlin is Russian by birth.
by origin, although he
was actually born in Russia.
That's true, but he was naturalised at quite a young age.
Yes, he was.
Was it New York? I think it was in New York.
I can't tell you where.
Yeah,
I wasn't there. I'm not that old.
Well, you're not American. You don't know about these things.
I know, that's true.
Of course, it's not American.
Well, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, this may be a surprise to you.
We have to report.
Yes.
But so it's interesting to consider.
Yes, I think it would be just nice to say that the American musical is a term. It's a well-known term, and it serves its purpose as far as it does. But I think that it can't be as narrow as that. I have to say, it's a broader. Musicals are broader.
There is sorry to go on.
No.
There is a case to say that, I mean, there are certain recurring locations, and obviously the US is a critical one. There aren't that many musicals set in Africa. The Lion King is the one that leaps to mind in terms of what's popular at the moment. There aren't that many musicals set in Asia, other than Anna and the King and I.
Yes.
Pacific Overtures.
Pacific Overtures, that's true. Well, of course, that's about the
Japan.
Relationship as well, Japan and the States. So but yes, I mean, a lot of it to do with Japan. Any Russian ones, or sort of Turkic or Altaic region?
Anastasia.
Yes, true. Persia, I suppose. You've got Aladdin. Is that Persian?
Yes, it is.
That's sort of it's where that war is.
But a very stylized. Yes.
There's something going on there at the moment. But
yes, I believe this.
But in the wider Persian area, that's where Aladdin
yes.
comes from. Well, and us as well.
Also,
fairness, Nick.
You've got Americans were upset when Wicked had English accents because they thought it had to be American, but.
Well,
where is Oz?
I mean, while I don't necessarily think that's a good logical argument, the one thing you might defend it on is you could say that Oz, Wizard of Oz, is actually a myth,
fantasy,
a really big myth in America, in a way that it isn't anywhere else.
No,
it's the way that it's its place in American culture is very different to its place in British culture.
Stephen Schwartz himself has said on Musical Talk that it's referenced every day on TV and in magazines and books, and in America it's a huge. People often say we're not in Kansas anymore, or whatever.
Right, exactly,
it's.
But can we not draw the point that Oz is not America?
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
It is actually quite specifically not America.
It's very specifically not Kansas. Yes. Exactly. But in another way, it is.
Well, yes, in a very
for
big.
For the sake of argument.
Yes, in a very big way, it is, of course.
Yes, but you're right.
But I think we're straying partly. I mean, my personal view is there's no point in trying to argue that. It's one thing or the other or anything else, because you can argue that the lyricist might be British, the composer might be American, the producer might be Russian. You could have any. It's actually the art form itself which is paramount, and the fact that it has been lazily designated the American musical.
I think it also depends.
It's neither here nor there.
I think it depends what era you were raised in. If you were like my age and your age, we remember that obviously the British invasion, which the Americans seem to call it, as if they're sort of angry about it, as it were.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Well, one hopes not. I mean,
they are.
We must be careful not to attribute too many views to the Americans, as they shouldn't attribute to us.
I think a lot of New Yorkers are very bitter about the fact that the British still have the longest running musical in the world.
Yes, indeed.
And a lot of because Americans, they don't like their glory to be.
What would happen if Les Mis were to close in London and then Blood Brothers?
Yes, the longest running.
Which of course has been nearly there for nearly as long.
20
suddenly
years.
Became the longest running musical. Although there's the Fantastics, of course, isn't there? Which is
off Broadway, isn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't a chorus line run for a long time as well?
It ran for a lot.
It was a very long line.
Have any of them run as long as Choo Chin Chow?
I don't
Is
know
that-
that was an enormously long
that's
run,
an-
but
it
was a long run, but
yeah.
it was. I don't know. But
It was
in
the longest
in the
running-
Hall of Fame. I don't know. If
I think it's the longest running American musical ever.
Right. Okay.
And where's it set?
Not Choo Choo Chow. Choo Choo Chow's
Yeah.
London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
London production.
But where's it set?
Yes, actually, yes.
Cleethorpes? I don't think so.
No, that's
And of
true.
course, you can now say Les Mis is both the longest running musical, both in terms of running length and running length.
Yes, yes.
Um,
that's
Is it?
correct.
I don't know how long it lasts, actually.
About 4 hours, it seems like.
No, it's not. But they've cut it back quite a lot now. 'Cause
Okay.
for contractual. I mean, they by
It's just called A Few Miserables now, is it?
yes, exactly.
Less
Less miserable.
Very good.
Thank you.
Exactly.
But
So,
I mean,
yeah.
but if you were from maybe the era of when Paul's in his 50s,
Right.
and he remember from his childhood, the American musical was the American musical. It was the
Yeah.
worldwide.
I think there is a case to be also, if you look at it from the opposite point of view, if you were, for example, Korean, or if you were, in Seoul, or if you were in Tokyo or wherever, you would be very conscious that a lot of what is playing in your theatres has originated in America. You might even be a little bit cross about it. I mean, talk about the British invasion. Let's, the American invasion, so to speak, of those places.
But that's the
It's
world
significant.
generally. America has invaded the world with
Culturally.
Its, with its
Let's
culture.
let's be
Yes.
honest here.
Yeah.
Culturally
Careful.
invaded.
But
Most countries do attempt, I have to say, most countries do attempt to culturally invade other countries as well. We're not behind. We have the BBC and the World Service. We do our best, as in Britain, to make sure that our view of the world is
Yeah,
spread out.
it's spread
Maybe
a
not
little
quite
bit.
so. It's not quite so
The BBC,
broad as
BBC
the,
is the biggest broadcasting company in the world. That's what it
I
stands
think we'll
for.
find as a corporation.
this is a
Actually,
corporation, yes.
I think
BBC
we'll
stands
find-
for the biggest broadcasting corporation.
that's one view.
But that is true. And
They don't do many musicals, though. Not too many, anyway.
they should splurge out into musicals. I think
There have been some
Well, they
10-minute
have-
musicals on Radio
Yeah.
4 recently.
Yes, that's
well,
true,
that
yes.
doesn't count.
Yes, they haven't quite gone into the big commercial
Yes.
operations, but I think that's probably a little outside their remit. But anyway,
There was news that the BBC would build a theme park. I don't know if you remember this at Television
I
Centre.
used to work. This is totally off topic, but I used to work at the BBC Experience, which was their very early attempt at a sort of not a theme
Exhibition,
park,
if
but an
anything else.
exhibition,
Was it an
really, yeah.
experience to be had by one and by all?
Well, I enjoyed it, but I like, I kind of
You
knew
had
a
to
lot
say that,
about
though,
the
didn't you?
history
Yes.
that they were talking about. So I only worked there for a month or two. Anyway, totally
Moving
irrelevant,
back to
really.
subject.
Moving back to the actual
I think it does appear that we're pretty much agreeing that fine.
It's
th-
now
there is an
become-
art form. It can be described as
Do you
American,
think
but it is wider than that.
If you were writing a new music, this is one question about it: is that if you were writing a new musical, can you just write it without, just as a composer, as a lyricist, book writer, would you ever write it without thinking of how might this play to an American audience? Now, you might write something which is like, this is a British musical, I don't mind if it never goes to America and whatever. But there must be anybody who really is after the commercial success must have at least half
Yeah.
an ear on what will play in America. I mean, we talked
Well,
on
around the
another
world
occasion.
now.
We talked about the possibility of adapting, say, The Life of Brian, for example. The Monty Python thing, given that they've done Spamalot. And of course, that probably won't happen precisely because they won't succeed on Broadway because that's too
You don't have
many
any Jews.
But
Which is a quotation from
Which is
the
a
the
quotation,
musical. In
yes,
case
in case
if you're turning off
worrying about
now.
the racism.
I think the best example of this is Jerry Springer the Opera.
Yes.
When, obviously far too offensive for America. Ironically, it's playing in Chicago where Paul is from, but anyway, that's another...
Well, I think it's not too offensive for America. I mean, there's definitely a tradition in America.
It's too offensive for commercial...
It would be unlikely to do Broadway, I would
Yeah.
have thought. Yeah.
but there were talks of it being... But backers backed out.
Right.
And... because it is too offensive, and there are offensive
Although, of course, it
lines.
is absolutely part of American culture. I mean, that's what it's grown
Ironically,
out of.
it's
Yes.
but
Jerry Springer is.
but then you could say it belongs in Chicago because that's where Jerry Springer
yes, that's right.
is
Yes.
from.
Or possibly
and-
Cincinnati.
well,
Yes, for which he was mayor.
But-
that's the third largest
but
city in Ohio. as
isn't
I believe he
that-
says.
you set it in a brothel.
Doesn't it actually illustrate the lie of the concept of that? Although yes, it deals fundamentally with an American television program and an American personality. It was, as you say, it's promoted into being a musical here
Yeah.
in Britain. Therefore, and it's about a piece of American culture which has been very much taken to the British hearts televisually. It's so. When does that culture stop being American? When does it start becoming international culture? I'm not going to say British culture because I don't believe that. I believe it's transcended borders.
It's difficult to say because, I mean, there are archetypal things which, I mean, for example, Aaron Frankel, who's written about writing the Broadway musical and how to do it and what are the formulas that you're supposed to do. Now, you might argue, I don't know if you necessarily can make this case, but you might argue that the formulas have emerged out of the Broadway musical. That's what's proven successful
The
in
I
a
Want
particular...
song and this song and
the
that
I
song.
Want song and the Charm songs and all that stuff. And therefore, it's evolved in an American cultural context. And therefore, you could say people who are writing successful formula musicals, again, are effectively importing American culture into their...
But here's the question then.
Although some don't, of course.
Yeah.
Christina Fran Duvemala, which we talked about recently.
But to touch on the point you made very early on in this discussion, which is where does the American musical come from in the first place? And I know not everyone accepts this, but you can trace it back through the Bellevue, New York, and Nigel Monckton musicals, back to Gilbert and Sullivan, for example. And indeed, Gilbert and Sullivan had huge success with their operettas in America, so much so that to avoid American copyright piracy, because many of the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas were being performed in America without any royalties being paid back to the D'Oyly Carte Opera Company here in London, that the Pirates of Penzance was actually premiered in America, just to make sure that
there were no pirate copies.
Well, ironically, that is exactly what it was all about. So, but you know, there is a direct line trace, and it's not the only father of the American musical, but Gilbert and Sullivan are certainly godparents, if they're not direct blood descendants, and it's true of various other forms. So, you know, once again, it's silly to claim that anything belongs to any one country. And
well, that's absolutely true, because of course the other account of, in fact, the more conventional account is that you go via George M. Cohen back to operetta and Lehar. The Merry Widow is also a great commercial success.
But operetta is not an American form.
No, not at all.
If you're using that parochial boundary-based sense.
But I'm saying, yes, exactly. But I mean, obviously, well, to be honest, I don't know, we may get unpopular for saying it, but I suppose there's a certain insecurity there, given that all of American culture, which isn't Native American or Native, American Indian, is actually going to be traceable back to European.
Do you think that what Paul meant is that the book musical is an American art form?
Well, I mean, Hammerstein is supposedly the progenitor of all of that, and undeniably, I believe he was American. So I guess.
Does that make the non-book musical, which is also an American form? You know, well, I mean, if you're talking about serious books like Showboat and onwards,
integrated
that's fine.
Musical theatre, I suppose.
But what about the Fred Astaire musicals? What about the
dancing things for no particular reason? The big dance number. I mean,
in what?
The Fred Astaire.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, although there is a story there, it's very flighty. It's not deemed to be important, the Fred Astaire musicals, in that sense, book-wise, and it does not compare to Showboat or Oklahoma and all the other Oscar Hammerstein things. But they're as American as apple pie. Although, of course, Fred Astaire has Austrian forebears. There's
a different separation these days, in the sense that the
low, of
often
course.
now. It's much less to do with the country it's in, and much more to do with whether it's in the city or in the outside of the city, because musicals are a pretty urban form, I mean that's where they play.
Central London.
If you look at something like, I was just looking up the other day, a very new musical called In the Heights, which uses a lot of hip hop and it uses a lot of urban. And Rent would be another classic. I think In the Heights kind of follows a little bit in the pattern of that. And it's not that they're trying. They're obviously they're American, but they're specifically urban American. They're to do with multiracial environments and where people speak multiple languages. And that's quite a separation in itself from, for example, the world of Oklahoma and the world of Carousel.
So I think what we're really saying, boiling this down, is that Paul has raised some very interesting points, and I hope
we
Paul
should take them into account.
And I hope, Paul, that you've whether you agree with our views or not. So we extend to you our open hand of non-nationalistic friendship.
I think we'll continue this discussion on the forums, because I think it's quite an interesting
debate
to carry out. Moving on, we're now going to feature the interview I did with the wonderful Emma Williams, who, at her time when she started in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang at the world premiere at the London Palladium, she was 18 years old, the youngest leading lady in the West End's history. And she's recently been in a musical about Christine Keeler called A Model Girl, which is now closed, but they are going to rework it some more and hopefully bring it back. So I went to have a chat with Emma about her past and her present and her future, and here's what we had to say. It's Emma Williams. Hello.
Hello.
Sat here on the stage of the Greenwich Theatre, where I had the pleasure of seeing A Model Girl last night. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a far cry from your first role, which I remember seeing you in at the slightly larger stage of the Palladium.
Absolutely. I think it's about as far removed from Truly as you could get, really. And I think that's why I like it. I like playing very varying characters, and Christine is a huge leap for me, I think, first off because I'm playing someone real for the first time in my life, which is wonderful. And you do take that into account. You are very aware that the person you're playing still exists and is still alive, and you want to give a you want to give a very sort of a complimentary performance, shall we say, that's hopefully as unbiased as it can be, and at the same time you have to respect that person. So it's been wonderful, actually. It's been a great journey, actually.
It's quite a racy role, isn't it? To put it mildly.
Yes, my brother hasn't been to see the show, and I think there's good reason for that. Though the boys in the cast said that I wouldn't be single by the end of the run, and sadly I still am. So I'm obviously doing something wrong. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it's an incredible sort of story. The whole Profumo scandal of the 1960s is just...
Now, for those who don't know, this is a true story set in England in the 1960s.
Yes. The early 60s. So
about a sort of showgirl, can we say?
Showgirl, yeah. She was a dancer and hostess. She was sort of one of the top-level showgirls at Murray's Club, which was a gentleman's club. Christine was a dancer there who was taken under the wing of Stephen Ward, an osteopath, who was also an acquirer of girls, shall we say, for the gentry.
A pimp?
Well, no, I don't believe he was. I believe he was more what you'd call a matchmaker. There's never been any sort of truth, I don't think, really behind the accusations of prostitution, which at the time, to be a pimp, or as they called him in a lot of the reports, a ponce, was quite... It was, you know, as close to being called a paedophile or something like that. It's got that same sort of connotation to it. The society would view you in a similar manner as we would now to somebody accused of that. I think he was dealt a hard deal, shall we say. I think he was a bit of a scapegoat. But my opinion has changed on this story so much through doing the show.
Living it.
Yeah, I mean, you do so much research, and you get to the point where whatever you're reading completely contradicts with what you're reading elsewhere.
Without giving anything away, it's really quite interesting how it all turns out in the end.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't done anything with this show to make it more melodramatic, shall we say. We've stuck as closely to the facts as we can for the purposes of the musical.
I think that's important when you're doing
Very much so. You know, it doesn't finish with a big old happy, cheery ending of, Profumo and Christine get married, because that's not what happened, you know. I was stopped yesterday on the street by a gentleman who went, I was a friend of Profumo's son, and I remember being a young boy at the time when all this happened. It's like, my goodness, everybody that you stop and talk to who remembers it has a different idea of what happened. And a lot of it's because of what they were told by the press, and that most people got their information from what was in the papers. And as we all know, you know, the press don't always report the truth, they report what they want us to know. And it's difficult to sort of brush aside all those bits of fact that kind of sit like debris on the top of the real story and find out the truth underneath. And we're still working on it, we're still trying to find it, even though we're nearing the end of our run now. It's incredible. And I do sincerely hope the show has another life, I have to say, because I think there's a lot in it that people who don't know the Profumo affair too well, or think they know it and would like to know a little bit more and maybe get closer to the truth, and I think it's got a life out there. So.
I didn't know much about it when I came to see it last night, and I was gripped by it all.
That's wonderful. I think that's great, because when you're so close to a show like this and you've done so much research, you sometimes wonder whether it only makes sense in your mind because you know so much about it. I mean, I had a friend of mine come, Trent, who's Australian, he's very young, and he knows nothing about the Profumo affair. And I was like, did it make sense to you? Did it work for him? And he said, absolutely, completely. And he's now gone off and is reading into the scandal.
You must have done a load of research for this role, because there is a lot of facts and film reels available. And did you enjoy doing that?
I did. I found it quite difficult. I mean, I started researching into Christine when I was auditioning for the role. I'd already read one of her autobiographies whilst I was doing Chitty.
Before this even came along?
Yeah, way before this was even sort of mentioned to me. And I started to do research whilst I was auditioning, and then once I'd got the role was doing more research. And it got to a point early in rehearsals where I stopped reading, because I would take one biography by Christine from 20 years ago and take it with the most recent one, and the facts were completely contradictory.
Sources were different.
Absolutely. She's much more open in the early biographies. There's a real naivety to the way it's written. I think particularly because nowadays when you write things, ghostwriters tend to get their hands on things, and editors a lot more than maybe was possible at the time. A lot of the things, such as things like reading the Lord Denning report, which was a huge bestseller because people thought it was full of all sorts of scandalous gossip, and it's really dull. It's really quite dull, and it tells you nothing. I mean, it doesn't even say in there that Christine was a prostitute, which was one of their primary concerns in trying to send Stephen Ward down as a pimp. Was trying to prove that Christine Keeler, who he definitely had an attachment with, and definitely as far as the public were concerned, that he'd pimped her. And even in the Lord Denning report, it only ever refers to as a girl whose persuasion, I think, or profession is obvious from this picture, which is the picture of her on the chair, which was taken as a modelling photograph for a film she was going to do.
Famous picture.
Very famous picture. So it's so bizarre. I mean, everything's been twisted to make it work, I think, as far as the court case was concerned. And I find it really hard. And I think particularly like James Clyde, who plays Stephen Ward in the show, has done an awful lot of research into Stephen and into the trial of him. And I know he's just finished reading a book about the trial, written at the time by a friend of Stephen Ward's. And I think he's found it quite harrowing reading, because you realise that this guy's life was just basically taken away from him, so that the only thing he could do was commit suicide, because he wouldn't have had a life left. Sorry.
That doesn't happen.
You didn't hear that. Maybe he lives. I don't know.
They'll have a chorus line at the end. With their hats and shiny coats.
Yeah, it's a big kick line. It's lovely. We do a tap number. It just has fascinated me completely. It's my only things I wish that I'd managed to meet Christine. I did approach her through the producers, and she wasn't forthcoming, and I have to respect that and take a step back. That's up to her.
Did you watch the film?
Do you know, I haven't watched Scandal. I have seen it a long time ago.
But you haven't watched it?
But I haven't watched it in the run-up to this, mainly because I didn't want to do an interpretation of Joanne Whalley's interpretation of Christine, and I thought that was quite important. So I held off from watching it. Do you know what? I'll probably go and watch it next week.
Order it on Amazon.
Yes. We sat there waiting for me come Monday morning.
So let's jump back a couple of years to your first big role in the most phantasmagorical stage musical in the history of everything. The mega hit Chitty Chitty Bang Bang played at the world famous London Palladium for 4 years?
4 years, I believe,
It's the longest run they've ever had, because it's not the easiest house to hold a show.
It's an unusual theatre. I mean, it's spread quite far back as far as theatres go, and it's a huge playing space. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
I think I have footage of your first entrance onto the stage. I don't know how staged that was with Michael Ball.
That was completely and utterly, that actually happened. We did the press launch that day, and we were going back down through the dressing room spaces and walking through, and we're chatting, and Michael said, "Do you want to go on the stage?" And I'm like,
"No, I don't."
Yeah, go on then, absolutely. Still got the set from The King and I in there, which I'd been to see on my 17th birthday, sort of the year before. Sort of walked me out there, and it's gobsmacking to suddenly be in a theatre of that magnitude that you've watched from the audience and said to your mum, "I'm going to be on that stage one day," and she was like, "That's nice, dear."
So many people have said that, but you have been on that stage.
And
I went on the stage when I was 5 or 6, and they had Joseph playing there. I got to meet Jason Donovan afterwards, and
Cool.
He said, "What do you think of the show, Nick?" And I looked up to him, and this God at the time.
Yeah.
Red face from performing for. I said, "It was loud," and I think that was That was it. That was my meeting with Jason Donovan done.
Nice.
But it is an amazing aura on that stage. Because the people who perform there, Judy Garland, the Beatles, Elvis, Frank Sinatra.
The history of that theatre. And you're in your dressing room and you're going, "Oh my God, the people that were here," and then having people borrowing your dressing room on Sundays and leaving things behind, it's like, "Oh God, fabulous, absolutely incredible."
So you were lucky enough to be in the original cast with Michael Ball and Richard O'Brien, someone who you probably remember from your childhood running around a Crystal
Maze. I loved that game show so much.
Me too.
Oh.
What was it like meeting him the first day?
Richard is the most wonderful man. He's Fruit Loop. It's wonderful because he's a complete eccentric, and he isn't afraid to be himself. And I think that's wonderful. You don't get that very often.
That's what the Rocky Horror Show is about.
Absolutely. It's about being able to be yourself and be free. And he's just wonderful. I remember turning up and on that first day and meeting him, and then as rehearsals progressed, he sort of came in white jumpsuits with white jazz boots on, or fully in leopard print. It's just like, I love it. It's wonderful. And he's the nicest guy. But, and this is a big but, if you share a dressing room at the London Palladium, and if you're fortunate enough to be in the room that I was in, and he's in the room above you, Richard likes playing his songs loudly during the show when he's not on stage. So all I could hear was kind of
do the time.
thumping on the floor. She couldn't hear what he was singing because the walls are quite thick. There was music going on, but you couldn't quite make it out.
I remember on the DVD he has violins on his wall and
His
things.
dressing room was incredible. It was beautiful fabrics across the walls and all sorts of unusual instruments.
Do you still keep in touch with him?
I bumped into Richard, I think, at one of the last performances of Chitty, and you know, I bumped into Nicola McAuliffe on the street a few months ago, and it's that strange thing of that you pick up exactly where you left off, which is wonderful, and I love that about theatre, and that people understand that when you're doing a show, everything seems to go by the wayside. You know, I think the only people I tend to speak to when I'm in prep for a show seem to be my parents and my agent. Occasionally my cat.
Most important people in your life. Then.
My cat.
Yes.
No. It's strange because it's a very hectic lifestyle. And it's only once things settle down again that it's, you know, that it becomes easier.
Putting one of the preview nights aside, what was it like going up in this car, as I think I should call it?
Chitty. Do you know, I used to talk to her every night before the show.
Is she a good conversationalist?
She's fantastic. It was that sort of thing of, you know, when you've done something on one night and you kind of go, well, it worked, and it worked really well that night, so maybe I should do it every night, because if I don't do it one night, then it might not work.
Like one night it didn't.
Things are temperamental, you know. That car was a diva at times.
As Michael Ball said, you know, it's one of the difficult stars that he's worked with in his life.
You sit there and you get, you know, dogs, children,
Yes.
flying cars. So what were we thinking? I found it was amazing. I mean, I did actually cry the first time I went up in her. Not through joy, but through sheer terror, because I'm scared of heights.
Oh dear.
So that was interesting.
It does
to
lift
say
up
the
quite
least.
high and it goes quite fast.
She goes very high. The interesting thing with her particularly was when we first went up in her, we didn't have any wings. When we were doing the rehearsals in the car, the wings hadn't been fitted yet, the hydraulics were just, you know, working their own thing, but nothing attached to them. And it's only when the wings aren't there that you realise quite how high you are. And that's a little, because you can look down and see, I mean, we had brace boards fitted for our feet, we had seat belts attached. You know, it felt like going on a ride at Alton Towers at times. And at the same time, you're smiling and trying to look like you're thoroughly enjoying every minute of it. And sing. I have to say, when I went back and saw the show, because I'd never seen the car fly until after finishing the show. So when I finally went back and saw it, I think on Michael's second to last night, and then all of a sudden she flew, and I sobbed. I actually sobbed, and I'm sat there going, I know how this works. I've seen the magic. I've been in the car. Why am I crying? And it's just...
Anthony Wardley, you know, who did the set design, he said, you sit there in the audience and you know how it's done, or you may, you know there's something doing it, but you don't care.
No.
You care about the fact
It's
that
magic.
it is done.
I don't think that anybody could go and see that show and not be moved by that moment, particularly if it's been such a part of their childhood. And I think the most wonderful thing about that show was doing a show for children, seeing an audience full of children, say, on the days when we had school parties in, because the look on a child's face, you cannot fake that kind of joy in a child. They're the hardest audience to play to, because if they don't like something, they will tell you. And
They'll cough and splutter. And
and seeing a child awestruck by something like that is the most beautiful sight in the world.
And I remember you had set pieces flying on from the auditorium and or off, and Richard O'Brien flies up in the net.
Yeah, absolutely.
400 feet up in the air, whatever, how...
Don't. I was sat there going, I might just do that, you know, because, you know, people occasionally did the fly as a bit of a treat and things. I was like, right, I'll do that before I leave. But I chickened out completely.
Flying seems to be a bit of a motif in the West End at the moment.
Yeah.
With Mary Poppins, which still brings a tear to my eyes when she flies over the audience in such a graceful way. Wicked has quite a powerful effect on me.
Absolutely.
And Peter Pan occasionally, but I think Chitty really started a craze for
I think-
big special effects involving the whole theatre.
I think the thing is that technology is constantly improving, that we can do things like Chitty and
Have thin wires.
and make them amazing. I mean, and it's not even, I mean, Chitty is a beast of a machine. That's a lot of weight there. It's got something like, you know, thousands of tiny lights inside it so that you can light the actual car without needing an external light. This is technology we didn't have 10 years ago, and I think as technology develops more, we'll get more of the shows that we dream that one day we'll produce.
I was having a lecture yesterday about scenography, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, how far can we go if we have 4-story houses that glide around on stage, and cars that fly, and people that fly, and I think Lord of the Rings will be interesting when that opens.
Lord of the Rings is going to be immense. Ruth Carney, the director of Model Girl, is the assistant on it, so we've been hearing bits from rehearsals, and it just sounds incredible.
One of my co-presenters auditioned for it, and he was told if he got in, he'd have to do 6 weeks of stilt school.
Yes.
Which sounds great fun. If I had any talent, I would do it. And what do you think the future of the West End holds? Because a lot of people said theatre's dying. It's all jukebox musicals. And
Well, jukebox musicals are one thing.
Yeah.
I think it depends, because there are some very good ones out there, and I think the thing is you've got to find a story with a heart to at the end of the day if you're going to do this. And you have to have music that works and tells a story. The main thing with a musical normally is that the story doesn't stop for a song. The song pushes the story onwards. Because otherwise you're stopping, every 10 minutes for 3 minutes of break time. And that's not what you want. You want the story to continually move. It needs to constantly push the story and the plot further. And sometimes musicals don't work quite so well for that because they weren't written with the story in mind. They were written beforehand.
it's always moulded around the songs.
Yeah, however, working on Desperate last year was the most amazing experience because it's all Blondie music. Now, Debbie Harry and Blondie collectively are incredible poets when it comes to music, and the story of Desperately Seeking Susan, for some reason these two cult phenomena seem to fit incredibly well together, and they work.
Of course, there are cases where it does work.
It was gobsmacking to find it when it works like that, and to get to be involved in something like that. It's the first one I've been involved with like that. And then if there was something that didn't work, they weren't scared to go, it doesn't work, let's get rid of it, let's move it, let's change it. And I think that's the thing, is it's got to be done for the right reasons. I think too many shows seem to be getting put on purely because they've got money behind them, and people going, hey, we like these songs, let's put a show on it, it'd be great. I think the difficult thing with theatre at the moment is the fact that ticket prices are so expensive. Families can't go to the theatre. I grew up in Yorkshire. I'd been to a West End theatre twice before I moved to London to start Chitty. I saw Chicago when I was 16, and I saw The King and I when I was 17 then.
That looked like a marvellous production with the gilded elephants. And
beautiful production, absolutely beautiful. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Do you think production values have become so important that the audience really want them to enjoy a musical? Like The King and I, could it be done at the Palladium with no gilded elephants?
It could. I think a
something
prime
that's
example for me was doing Sunset Boulevard, which we rehearsed for 2 weeks and did 2 performances in Cork for BBC Radio 2. Now, Sunset Boulevard normally has incredibly lavish productions. There are staircases, there are swimming pools, there's a huge ensemble. We did it with 16 people and a 72-piece symphonic orchestra, and I maintained to that day that's how that show should be done. You don't need a staircase, you don't need a lot of costumes. Get 6 microphones, stand them up, have a table, have a chaise, have a typewriter, and have a 72-piece symphonic orchestra, and that's the way to hear that show done.
I saw
just gobsmacking.
I saw the concert version of Follies a couple of weeks ago, and famously Follies, when it originally opened on Broadway, was the biggest production ever staged in the history of everything, and then came Chitty. But at the Palladium, it was just an orchestra, art-said dancers, and a brilliant cast.
I think you really see how good a show is
if you rip it down to its bare...
put it down to the bare minimum, and hear it played and sung as it's needed to be. And also, the thing is, we can't afford massive orchestras in the West End these days. They are so expensive. And the problem is that the more money you put into a show to get it on, the more money you need to recoup. Therefore, the more audience you need to get in. So the higher ticket prices go up just in case you don't get the audience. And then, you get people like me going, I'm not paying 60 blooming quid for a ticket. Don't be daft. So... the northerner in me comes out and goes, whoa, I don't think so. I could buy a pair of shoes for that.
Get on Tinternet.
Get on Tinternet and find something cheaper. I think that money isn't being put into theatre, and we need to put more money into
People are
theatre
scared
in
of new
all aspects of
productions.
theatre. Yeah, we don't embrace them quite as much as they do in other countries, particularly say somewhere like New York. We don't embrace the new show quite so easily. And also we struggle because we have a lot of very small fringe venues, like 80-seaters, like the New End in Hampstead. Fabulous little space.
The King's Head.
Absolutely, the Gate, and wonderful places like that. And then we have from 800, 900 seats in the West End, and a couple of smaller ones, a couple of 200-seaters, but we don't have anything, 500, 600 seats, we don't have anything like that can embrace smaller shows, that could embrace plays and fill them up. We've got Trafalgar Studios, We have here at Greenwich, which unfortunately is a little out of the way.
Fortune Theatre's quite small, but that has a hit in it, which is called The Woman in Black.
Well, exactly.
But then you have...
That's kind of not moving anywhere.
But then you have the Apollo in Victoria.
Which is massive. Absolutely huge. When you get new shows that want to find a new home, such as Bat Boy. I mean, Bat Boy really wanted somewhere about 800, 900 seats. That's what it needed. It needed an intimate space. But it had restrictions because of size of cast, type of show, set design, things like that. We were limited to where we could go. And as such, probably ended up at the wrong place. And that's difficult because...
Was it the Shaftesbury?
Yeah, it was, which was too big a theatre for it. And I still maintain that I think it's an excellent show. I do think it's an excellent show, but I do think it's the Marmite of musicals. You either love it or hate it.
Yes, you seem to be quite attracted to musicals based on newspaper clippings.
I'm attracted to new musicals.
Yeah.
I'm attracted to something I can get my hands on and go,
And work
okay,
with the writers.
Why is this like this? How about this? Can I... And get to be really creative. I didn't come into this industry not to be creative, and I find I'm passionate about that, and that's why I love working on new shows. Whereas I think the difficult thing in something that's been long running is having to step into somebody else's shoes, who stepped into someone else's shoes, and so on. So you're making movements and you're performing gestures and going places that you're supposed to go to on a certain line or a certain timing, but you don't know why you're doing them. It's a little bit that whole, what's my motivation? But it is just a case of, I'm doing this because of the fact that an actor, 5 years ago, decided that's what they were doing. And you really want to get them on the phone and can I just ask them why? Just so I can figure it out for myself. And that's why I like doing new shows. I like getting to be creative. I think it's wonderful. Yeah.
Moving away from musical theatre, very briefly. Miss Marple.
Oh, love Miss Marple. So much fun.
A British institution along with Hercule
Poirot. Interesting. I mean, most people assume I started in musical theatre, and I didn't. I started in television when I was 14. And I used to sort of do one job a year because my school wouldn't let me do any more. And then I did ITV drama premieres, and then made a film when I was 17, and that's what got me signed to an agent, and that's how I ended up in Chitty. So it's been really nice that in the last few years I've gone back to what I would say are my roots and gone back to television with
Bleak House, of course.
Miss Marple. Bleak House was wonderful, and getting to do that staple of any actor, doctors, has to be done at some point in your career. Yeah, I'm like that. I got a cheque the other day for them for royalties for selling it to some Far Eastern country. 17 pence. Ooh. I didn't know whether to bank it or frame it. I love working in television and film. I absolutely adore it. And I do
but
still
surely
swap and
theatre's
change.
more rewarding because you can get a reaction immediately.
Theatre is wonderful because you get an immediate
Yeah.
moment. You have to be on top of your game in theatre. You have to be in that place to play that character for 2.5 hours every night. You can't sort of go, can we just do that again? I was a bit rubbish in that take. And there'll be times you come off halfway through a show going, I've forgotten how to act. I've completely forgotten how to act. And you tend to punish yourself a lot more when you're in theatre, because if you don't have a great show, it really, personally for me, it really gets to me, and I'm determined to be better.
Was it a perfect show last night that I saw?
I had a pretty good one last night, apart from running into a wall, nearly falling down some steps and falling over twice.
Right. Because you have quite a tricky task bringing your own, because of these steps, it makes it quite difficult to bring your sets on.
Yeah, the steps are a little bit of a nightmare, because obviously we didn't rehearse with them until we got into the theatre. So
if you go onto Emma's blog, you can read her her monthly rantings, I think.
Yes, they were weekly until we got into this show, and I was too tired. But I'm covered in bruises. I've got some impressive bruises, actually, from this show, which is really worrying.
Going back to the sultry nature of the show, you're moving around quite a lot, aren't you, with people classed up against you and things, and I'm sure everyone enjoys it quite a lot.
Are you referring to the fact that I seem to kiss 3 different people in this one show?
I'm talking more than kissing, but
It's quite physical, yes. We have a couple of dance numbers. I'm only in one of them.
The ballroom.
And then the ballroom as well, with the waltzing. I love to dance. I danced for most of my life, and I absolutely adore dancing. So it's nice to get a chance to for once. But I'm surprisingly quite a shy person when it comes to things like that. So when you meet somebody on the first day of rehearsals and you shake their hand, and then 3 days later you've got
their legs around
you've got
you.
Somebody going, okay, so if you put your legs around their waist, and then if you just grind a bit, and I'm just slowly getting redder and redder and getting more embarrassed. And then it came to the things like the nudity moments. And we rehearsed one of the moments where I strip off down to my underwear and then take my bra off. And we rehearsed that in rehearsal with me clothed, and then practice underwear. And I got about halfway through the strip, and I went to unhook my bra and suddenly realised I couldn't actually do it the way we were doing the scene. I went, sorry, so many years of taking off my own underwear, for some reason in front of a load of cast, I can't do it. I seem to have lost the ability.
And a 200-member audience.
Don't. It was a little terrifying, actually, the first time doing it, just like That Boy was. But I think the full nudity moment at the end of Act 1 is...
I think it was quite tastefully done.
I think it's very well done, and I like that. The most terrifying part of that was actually doing it in tech, because they sort of lit me in my underwear for about 45 minutes. Constantly me doing the scene, and then them going, next time we'll do it with your underwear off. Okay, next. No, not this. Okay, next time. Not now? Okay. And then all they go, now, take your clothes off. And you're like, what, now? Oh, God. I was so terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I mean, nobody's seen me naked in about 9 months apart from my cat. Until press night and 400 member of the audience. Oh, God. Well, it's no wonder my brother didn't come and see it, is it?
Well, your parents been?
They have indeed. They were here on press night, and they're here for the last night. I've had lots of friends and family, and so it's been lovely.
I really enjoyed it. It's kept me gripped and I was on the edge of my seat. It's nice to have new work again, as you say, in London.
It's wonderful, and Greenwich is one of the only theatres that has a bursary specifically for new musical theatre.
Of course, you have the famous Musical Theatre Challenge, which
Indeed.
Greenwich run every year.
Indeed. I've managed to get to see one of them the other week, and unfortunately, the time that they do the Musical Theatre Challenge performance is at the time I think somebody's pinning God knows how much Bolivian nun hair into my head to cover my microphone. So I don't tend to get down very often. It's sort of a 2.5 hour prep on this show for me, which is mental, but well worth it, I think.
Your extensions.
Oh, my wig. I love that wig so much. I'm so going to miss it. I have to say, the relief at the end of the night when you take off, a mountain of hair, of extra hair, and a load of pins and a microphone that's sitting in the back. It's just... It's the most wonderful relief.
Like taking off a woolly jumper, it's been itching you or something.
Yeah, but imagine it's a woolly jumper made of barbed wire, and then you'll be close.
I'd rather not, thank you. I'll leave the weirdism up to you.
Oh.
When does this finish?
We finish at Greenwich on the 24th of February, this Saturday.
Are we transferring?
We're not for the moment, but I do know that they are going back into work on some more of the script and music. It's very much a work in progress still. I think from having an audience in, we've managed to figure out what needs doing to it. So Marek and Richard, the writer and composer, opposite round, will probably be working with Ruth and figuring out where to take it next, because I think it does need another life and it does need to go further. So
let's hope it does.
He is hoping.
And hope you're involved in it. Continue. You be originating the role.
Fingers crossed. Does that mean I can't eat chocolate again for a long time? Oh,
it's bad for you.
Yeah, I know, but it tastes so good.
The lovely Miss Emma Williams there. Now, you probably read or seen in the newspaper, whether you're in the US or the UK, that Daniel Radcliffe is starring in a play here in London called Equus. And Tim was lucky enough to go and see Equus. So now I'm going to hand you over to Tim to tell you what he thought about it.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, so we've been asked to report on Equus, which is running at the Guildford Theatre in London's West End at the moment. Daniel Radcliffe is appearing in it, famous, of course, as the boy wizard, Harry Potter. This is a very different kind of proposition, though. We're talking about a play from the 70s written by Peter Shaffer, which is all about the rather shocking case of a boy who blinds 9 horses in a fit of what can only be described as religious rage. So we see the process of him being psychoanalyzed and we think possibly cured, or at least made a little bit more normal by his psychologist, Dysart, who was played by Richard Griffiths, of course, who also appears in the Harry Potter films as Uncle Vernon, but who also is a very experienced and distinguished stage actor. In terms of the actual staging that we get, we're talking about a long way away from traditional musical theatre staging. It's very, very simple, very Brechtian. We've got a raised area in the stage in the middle and just 4 black blocks that get moved around, and also a sort of circular area around the edge too, and the horses are done in a very stylized way with metal masks. We also get members of the audience actually up on the stage, or seated up on the stage, to give us kind of the feeling that Alan is in the middle of a sort of amphitheatre, or he's a public spectacle in an arena as he's being cured. And this all fits into the sort of Greek classical themes. Dysart, the psychologist, is obsessed with ancient Greek history and imagines himself in a dream as if he were a kind of high priest sacrificing the children that he psychoanalyzes to the ritual of the normal. And the normal is the big problem at the centre of the play. Alan Strang, the character played by Daniel Radcliffe, who's a 17-year-old boy, clearly not normal at all, but the play asks us whether the sorts of emotions he experiences aren't the type of thing that we really laud in classical culture. So there are some rather dated parts about how psychology is supposed to work, and abreaction and other types of jargon, Freudian jargon, are used in it, but it's also clear that Peter Shaffer, even in the 70s, is kind of criticising the idea that you can kind of just go into someone's head and move things around and cure them in the way that psychology at that time tended to suppose. We now know that things are rather more complicated. Now, the play is judged as being, and was in its time judged as being, rather iconoclastic and rather shocking, simply because, of course, of the nudity that was employed, as well as the actual context of that nudity. Now, of course, a big fuss has been made about this, and apparently it's upset studio executives at Warner Brothers, and they're worried about Daniel Radcliffe ditching this squeaky clean, child-friendly image, because, of course, he still has 3 more Harry Potter films to release, and he's just signed up for the last 2, we've heard. He, however, very sensibly, clearly wants to make a big, clear statement about the fact that he now considers himself an adult performer, which is a very good sign, because a lot of child stars are forced into playing it safe to please the same audiences that they had previously, and that sort of stunts their development as actors in a way. Daniel Radcliffe is following in the footsteps, at least to a certain extent, of Macaulay Culkin, who's also taken on serious adult acting challenges and much more cynical parts in much more adult storylines. Not following him in every respect, of course, because Macaulay Culkin had all that trouble with the money. Let's hope that doesn't happen to Daniel. In terms of the parts of the show where the nudity is employed, they're really not quite what the marketing might lead you to expect. The marketing obviously was a very clever bit of marketing, which plays up the alluring nature of Daniel Radcliffe undressed. But really, by the time we get to the part where the nudity comes along, we're then into the most harrowing and shocking section of the play. So the nudity, rather than being titillating in any way, actually just gives you a sense of the character's extreme vulnerability at this particular moment. So you get a very much more emotional response to it, and the response of Dysart is to want to protect him, and I think that's probably how most of the audience will also feel. Now, there may be a number of fans of Daniel Radcliffe who go and buy tickets for this. They're going to get something that they certainly haven't ever seen him doing before, so expanding his range. However, if you're the kind of fan of Daniel Radcliffe who really just wants to imagine him as Harry Potter and as this idealised figure, then this is really not the play to go and see. This is much, much darker than anything he's done before. But if you are interested in going to see it, it's playing at the Greenwich Theatre. It's currently selling tickets until Saturday the 9th of June, and the website is at www.equustheplay.com. Over to you, Nick.
That's it for this week's episode of Musical Talk. Thank you very much, Tim, and we will see you next week. Remember to visit our website at our new address, www.musicaltalk.co.uk. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
This has been a production of Musical Talk. If you have any questions or comments, please call the U.S. Musical Talk line on 206-338-6302 or the UK Musical Talk line at 0700 593 0764, or you can email us at musicaltalk@hotmail.co.uk.